our start of the Constitutional Convention. But first, let's do some matching. So, number one, distances from Great Britain, Mayflower Compact, Virginia House of Burgesses, Fundamental Orders of Connecticut. Were those the middle colonies, the southern colonies economy? Were they Yorktown, or were they the growth of representative government? Number two, grains such as wheat, barley, and oats. Were those from middle colonies economy, southern colonies economy, Yorktown, or the growth of representative government? All right, so I'm just going to read these now. Transatlantic slave trade, plantations, cash crops, and fertile soil. Last major battle, resulting in British defeat. Britain signed the Treaty of Paris 1783 and recognized U.S. independence. All right, so it should be one of those. Match those up. Turning point of the war, France joined with the Patriots. So was that the Fundamental Orders of Connecticut, Saratoga, Unalienable Rights, or Virginia House of Burgesses? First representative legislature allowed citizens to elect representatives. Rights all people have from birth, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Match those with the ones over here on this side. Okay, so let's talk about our bell ringer. Were the Articles of Confederation an effective form of government? So could they actually do what they needed to for the people? What were some of the weaknesses of the AOC, or the Articles of Confederation? That's what we're going to call them. All right. After discussing the Articles of Confederation, we're now going to turn to some more review. Our question here, what was the purpose of the Northwest Ordinance? And how many citizens had to live in the territory before it could apply for statehood? All right. I'm not going to answer any of these because we may stop, or you can answer it on the questions that we ask. Okay, looking at this, we have a graphic. So anytime you have one of these, just read each box individually. Distance from Great Britain, the need for a lawmaking structure, traditional rights of Englishmen. Those are all pointing to American colonists. Which of the following best replaces the question mark in the diagram above? American colonists created a general council to manage the colonies, experienced strict control by Parliament, established their own representative institutions, appointed governors who reported to the king. So those are our answers. Choose your answer, and let's move on. All right, the reason the Articles of Confederation only established the legislature branch was to show the importance of a representative legislature to foreign nations, keep power out of the hands of the courts, ensure the government would not become too powerful, give the legislature supreme rule over the states. All right, here is a vocabulary word you need to write down in the back of your journal. Bicameral. Okay, so what does bi mean? Okay, you might know other words with the word bi in it, such as bicycle. That's bicycle. So bi means two, right? Bicameral means two houses to the legislature. In America, we have the House of Representatives today and the Senate. We're going to talk about how we got to that. All right. Today, we're going to learn about several compromises. What was the primary purpose of the Philadelphia Convention? Okay, the Philadelphia Convention is also called the Constitutional Convention. So what was the purpose of the Constitutional Convention? All right. So we're going to skip this video for now and maybe come back to it at the end.
The Revolutionary War.
Okay. So, Shays' Rebellion. Here's a question to think about. How would you feel if you completed a job, but you were never paid for the work? Maybe you worked for your boss for several years, 3, 4 years, and you were promised to be paid. Well, that's kind of what happened to American soldiers during the American Revolution. Many soldiers could not be paid after the war ended. When they returned back to their old life, they didn't have any money. That becomes a big issue. The government tried to pay the soldiers, but the Articles didn't allow the government to raise taxes, right? The Articles of Confederation had no way to get money from each of the states. So they couldn't pay the soldiers their fair money, the fair wages they had earned. As a result, the soldiers and farmers didn't have money that they needed to pay their bills. They had all this debt that they needed to pay off, and many of them were having so much trouble. Banks started taking farmers' land for not repaying their debt. Same thing that would happen today. Some farmers in Massachusetts even went to jail. And this led to something called Shays' Rebellion. Farmers led by a guy named Daniel Shay attacked and closed the courts in two Massachusetts counties to prevent any more farms from being taken. What do you think? Would you support Shays' Rebellion if you were a farmer? Explain why or why not. As that happened, there was no national army. There was no way to actually stop Shays' Rebellion, especially if it had spread to other states, other places. For now, it was just located in Massachusetts. The state militia was finally able to put down Shays' Rebellion, but many Americans now felt a major need for a stronger national government because the Articles of Confederation couldn't even raise an army. It was very difficult for them to uh, start another army, and all the soldiers had already gone home, like we talked about after the American Revolution. Many believed it was time to either rewrite or completely throw out the Articles of Confederation. The states will call for a convention to revise the Articles. You might know this word from your English class, revise. Okay, so looking at the picture here, you can see the Confederation is a broom, all the different uh, pieces of paper, and they're sweeping out all the trash, right? All right, so let's summarize. You need to summarize who was involved in Shays' Rebellion, what happened, okay? And then what was the effect of Shays' Rebellion? Because of Shays' Rebellion, what did people in America begin to think that we needed? All right, here is a question from 2013 Star. In 1787, the United States was at a crossroads. Farmers in western Massachusetts had rebelled the year before over property taxes. The state struggled to end the rebellion. Events such as this one contributed to the decision to sign the Treaty of Paris, repeal the Intolerable Acts, declare an embargo on imported goods, or restructure the federal government. Okay, let's move on. All right, here's where we start taking some actual notes. So you need to be writing down just like we normally would if we were doing this live. You're going to write down what's in red. But more than that, if you see anything else you need to write down, then you can do that too. Okay. So in February 1787, the Constitutional Convention was called. The Confederation Congress asked for all 13 states at that time to send a delegate, someone to represent them, to a convention for revising or editing the Articles of Confederation. Okay, so a convention, what you need to know is that a convention is just a fancy term for a meeting. Okay, if you go to a convention for TikTok users or something, it would be just a meeting for people who do that. Or if you went to a convention for exotic pets, right? Those are actual conventions. This convention was just a meeting of the delegates of the 13 states. The convention met in May and they chose, guess who? George Washington to preside or be the boss over the proceedings. Right away, there were some differences of opinion. Some delegates believed that only small changes should be made to the articles. Some of them thought they were already fine. right? Others thought that the article should be scrapped and trashed entirely. The delegates also argued over representation in Congress. They also argued over tariffs and slavery. A guy named James Madison, who would later become one of our presidents, was from Virginia, and he kept detailed notes of the meetings. So detailed that we know pretty much exactly what happened at the meetings. He was the author of the basic plan of government the convention finally adopted. For this reason, he is often called the father of the Constitution. All right, so James Madison came with a whole bunch of plans, or a plan that he presented, and he actually wrote a lot of the government plan, and he became known as the father of the Constitutional Convention and the father of the Constitution. Okay, so let's keep going. All right, so the Constitutional Convention also equals the Philadelphia Convention. The Philadelphia Convention of 1787 was originally called to create a new plan for the U.S. economy, write a new constitution for the United States, or make changes to the Articles of Confederation, pass laws to prevent the states from raising taxes. Choose one of those. Okay. Here is the meeting house in Philadelphia. This is actually now called Independence Hall. Okay. So you can go there today. I've actually been there before, and it's a really interesting place. You can see where it's right across from the Liberty Bell in Philadelphia. Really, really small room, small area, but it was important at the time, of course. So, sorry guys, I lost my place. There we go. Okay. So, this is what it may have looked like, and it actually still looks like this today. At least the building itself does, minus all the people outside. Okay. Here's some paintings of what it was thought happened in the room or in the building. You have people. So front and center, you see people like George Washington and Ben Franklin. And there's some other important people here that we probably don't recognize as much, but lots of people involved that were important, etc. Okay, so we know that Thomas Jefferson wrote the Declaration of Independence. So who wrote the U.S. Constitution? Right? Well, go back to your notes. What was the name of that guy we just talked about? The father of the Constitution, James Madison. All right, so they get to this convention and they're like, "Hey, we're gonna just make some edits, do some revising. No big deal." Okay, but it became pretty clear soon enough. Some big names were there: George Washington, Benjamin Franklin, Alexander Hamilton, among the delegates to the Constitutional Convention, and they quickly agreed that they needed to trash the entire Articles of Confederation and create a new constitution. Okay, a new constitution would be new laws, new ways to govern and have a government. The delegates generally agreed on the need for strengthening the national government and for creating a national executive, legislature, and judiciary branches. All right, so some major arguments during the Constitutional Convention. Number one, how should states even be represented? Large and small states argued over how their states should be represented. And that makes sense. Large population states felt that they should have more say, more power. They had a lot of people that lived in them. They should have more control. Large states wanted more representation or power. Go ahead and write that down. You need to know that. Large states wanted more representation and more power. I'm going to go ahead and move on. You can pause if need be. Small population states felt that they should have equal say and equal power. Interesting. So the smaller states wanted equal representation. They wanted to make sure it didn't matter how many people lived in their state. They wanted to be represented equally, just as much as Rhode Island is a small state. They wanted to have as much representation as Virginia, one of the biggest states. The results are that two plans were proposed. Two plans were given to the people at the convention. And the debates over the issue of representation got so heated that the convention almost ended. People were getting very upset about these things, very big things at stake. All right, so what do you think should happen? So there became two plans. The first plan is the Virginia plan. The Virginia plan is exactly like we think of today as the more population you have, the more representatives you should have. Okay. This is just named after the people, the representatives, the delegates from Virginia who proposed the plan. New Jersey plan, same thing, named after the people who proposed it. They were from the state of New Jersey, favored the small states. Each state would be given the same number of representatives regardless of their state's population. It didn't matter how many people you had in your state. You would still have exactly the same people, the amount of people, whether you were the biggest or the smallest state. Okay. The Virginia plan favored the large states, and each state would be given a number of representatives based on their state's population. I think this is important enough. You should go ahead and write this down. Okay, so even though this stuff isn't on there, go ahead and write it down, unless you're told otherwise. Virginia plan. As we said, this is what it looks like. And then here's the New Jersey plan. You can count them 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 16, right? So they would have 16 representatives for all states. That would be no matter how big or small they were. Okay. All right. So based on this chart, name 3 states that would be in favor of the Virginia plan. Okay. Looking through here, which states have the need to have representation based off of their population? Well, you can see Virginia. Again, Virginia was actually the biggest state here by population. 747,000 people versus little tiny Delaware. Okay, little tiny Delaware only had 59,000 of people compared to that, right? Virginia had 10 times as many, actually more than 10 times, like 12 times the amount of people. This is from the 1790 census. So this is where they actually recorded how many people lived in the states. Okay. All right. Now name 3 states that would be in favor of the New Jersey plan. Okay. We just talked about it, right? Rhode Island would probably be one. They have a small amount of people. So the state itself probably wants to have equal representation compared to the bigger states. All right. So this becomes a great compromise. Remember, a compromise is just an agreement from 2 opposing sides where they agree to, give up something that they're trying to ask for, and both sides have to give up something. So, for instance, if I wanted to go to Taco Bell and eat some tacos, and let's say a friend of mine wanted to go to Pizza Hut, and they want, well, guess what? We can actually compromise. We could go and go to a buffet, and we could compromise, and both of us could get what we wanted to, and that's just an example of that. Okay, so but the Great Compromise is what it becomes known as. Combined the New Jersey and the Virginia plan. The Great Compromise created a legislative branch with 2 houses, a bicameral legislative branch. Okay. This is from a guy named Roger Sherman from Connecticut. Connecticut was a small state, still is today. Membership in the lower house, the House of Representatives, would be based on population. The upper house, called the Senate, would have an equal number of members for each state. Okay, so the House of Representatives, and this is actually our capital right here, is what it looks like. We'll look at that again. So go ahead and write down the information here. Pause the video if you need to. Okay, so let's keep moving. So here we have the U.S. Senate. The U.S. Senate has 2 senators per state, regardless of their population. Okay, so today there's 100 senators total. 100, because we have 50 states, and 50 states times 2 senators gives us 100 senators today. This is from the New Jersey plan, right? This idea came from the New Jersey plan. The House of Representatives, on the other hand, is the other part of our legislative branch. Representatives would be per state based on population. There would be 435 members of the House today, and this number has changed throughout history, but it's always been more than this number over here. This was from the Virginia plan based off of population. All right, so today, this is what it looks like. Here's a state. They have 2 representatives, 2 from each state. And then from different states like Delaware, you may have only 1 representative. This is not exactly what it looks like today, but it's close enough, right? But then the bigger states, you would have, like for Virginia, they had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 representatives total. New Jersey was kind of in the middle. They had only 4 representatives. These are elected from each state according to the size of their population. This is known as the Great Compromise. This is what our Congress, here's an important word for you, Congress looks like even today. We have this setup based on either 2 from each state or elected from the state according to their population. All right, here's the actual Capitol building. You can go there and you can actually walk up the steps. I've been there a couple of times actually in my life. One side is the Senate, so all the senators meet over here, and the other side is the House of Representatives, and they meet over here. So that's what it looks like. That's our Capitol building. Sorry. This is the U.S. Capitol. That's spelled a little bit differently than what you normally think of. Instead of an A at the end, it has an O. That's not that important, but it is an interesting fact to know. All right, so here is a star question. Constitutional Convention puzzle. Okay, interesting. Not the way that me or Mr. Linehan would probably write this, but here it is. You have the Virginia plan. You have the New Jersey plan. All right, in the middle. Which of the following should replace the question mark in this diagram? Direct democracy, Great Compromise, checks and balances, or the Missouri Compromise? All right. Hopefully you chose the Great Compromise. The Great Compromise was where we combined the ideas from the Virginia plan and the ideas from the New Jersey plan and put them together into the government that we have today in America. In the United States, I should say. All right. Now, another big issue that was talked about and debated, more than talked about, was debated heatedly, was the representation of slaves. All right. So basically, counting the slaves and how much should be given to the states to base off their delegates. So the Southern delegates, of course, wanted slaves counted for representation so they could receive more representation, right? You have more people, you should receive more representation. But the Northern delegates did not want slaves to count towards representation. Why would the Northern states not want slaves to count towards representation? Well, could the slaves actually vote? Could they actually go and vote for the representative? No, they could not. So the delegates agreed the slave trade would not be discussed in Congress until 1808. A $10 tax would be placed on the importation of each slave. Runaway slaves would be returned to a state of slavery. Okay, so those are the things they actually, I know that was written, sorry, I kind of went fast there. Okay, so these were the things that were discussed, and they put off discussing slavery until literally another, 2 decades? Yeah. All right. So let's keep looking through here. All right. So the compromise became known as the Three-Fifths Compromise. Go ahead and write this down if you haven't already. The Three-Fifths Compromise agreed that African slaves would count as 3/5 of a person for representation and taxation purposes. Okay. So what that actually kind of looks like in actual real life would be that for every 3 free people, that's equal to 5 slaves. Okay. Or really, it should be flipped here. 5 slaves equal 3 free people. Okay. So that not all the slaves counted towards the population, only 3/5 of the population would be counted of the slaves. All right. So that became another big compromise. Okay, so based on this chart, name 3 states who wanted slaves to be counted as part of the representation. So looking at this, you can see here, this is the 1790 census records chart of slave populations. Slave populations, according to in Connecticut, only 1% of the slaves, the population, were slaves. Okay, compared to, again, Virginia, it's a big one, 39% of the people in Virginia were slaves. 39%. Imagine that. So Connecticut only had 1 out of every 10 people. Sorry, that's actually wrong. No, it would be 1 out of every 100 people would be a slave, whereas 39 out of 100 people in Virginia were slaves. Okay, so which states would want their slaves to be counted as part of the representation or uh, part of the population for representation? Name 3 states who do not want slaves to be counted as part of their representation. Okay, again, you can go through here and see, okay, Rhode Island, 1%. That's not very many people. Pennsylvania, less than 1%. And you might remember Pennsylvania had the Quakers living there. So it makes sense that they would have less slaves living in Pennsylvania. New Hampshire, 0.1%. Okay, that's literally 10 times smaller than 1%. Okay, so there's a little math class here. But these were small states that had very small populations of slaves. Okay. Oops, I think we went the wrong way. All right. So, how did the Three-Fifths Compromise solve the issue of slaves counting as part of a state's population? Okay. So, think back. And in fact, you might go ahead and write down, okay, so you might want to go ahead and just copy this down, draw 3 little people that show they're free people, and that equals 5 slaves. Okay, I would do that right on your notes, so you know the 3/5 compromise was about that. 5 slaves equal 3 free people to count towards the representation. All right, so our question again: how did the 3/5 compromise solve the issue of slaves counting as part of a state's population? Go ahead and answer that. Okay. And here is going to be what we're doing today. Hope you guys learned something interesting. See you later.